We're talking about SMEs because I am an SME, so we tend to call ourselves sometimes one-man bands because we have to do everything. You have to be the founder, the financier, the marketing, the accountant. Well, okay, not the accountant, but you know what I mean. And the question for us, I think, in this conversation, please take your seats. These are my panelists, and I will introduce them to you shortly. The question is always whether, in fact, there are learnings that can be taken from the way in which SMEs function. And joining me to have that conversation, please give a very warm welcome to Virginia Reese. She is the co-founder of Arihus AI, and Waleed Fatani, who is the Group CEO of Savola Group. To both of you, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you give them a warm welcome? Thank you. Otherwise, they feel a little bit unloved, and we want to make sure that you all feel loved and welcome. So, perhaps, Virginia, if I can start with you. Are SMEs really front runners when it comes to good work?
Yes, they are. And having worked with SMBs for quite many years, they are in the forefront of innovation, scalability, and the ability to take workers in and be able to be able to have their skills assessed for profitability. They're able to drive innovation, and I'm very bullish on them.
Waleed, even though I know that you work for a big organization, surely you must agree, or perhaps you don't, that there's a lot that can be learned from the way in which SMEs conduct their businesses and engage with the people who work with them.
That is true. The agility that SMEs offer and the proximity that they have with their people is extraordinary. And this is something that cannot be replicated in large corporates, for sure. However, I think it depends on the sector of SMEs. We talk about tech sectors, probably that energy and that engagement might be higher than other sectors, maybe in the manufacturing or industrial sector. So it depends on the sector. But I think there's a lot of learnings to be made from large corporates in terms of how to institutionalize good work policies to ensure engagement is at the highest level across the organization.
Well, let's try to break down some of those learnings then, perhaps, so that we can try to answer this question whether indeed they are front runners more specifically. One thing that I can imagine, because most SMEs have quite flat structures, they don't have sort of many layers within them, purely because they are so small. Has that been advantageous for them when it comes to workers who are having to come out of that environment and into more complex structures? And perhaps, Virginia, if I can come back to you on that first. And Waleed, I'd like you to ponder the same point, if you wouldn't mind. So, Virginia,
yes,
you go
I think
first.
it's very important. One thing that we find out from people that have exit interviews or people that are working in feedback is that the smokestack organizations do not work for many people. They need a flattened organization. We need to take the smokestacks and make it more fluid across an organization. And you find that in the SMB community. You also find that the culture within the SMB community is one of innovation. And as you take a look at a lot of SMBs, really they adhere to an ethos of Kaizen, which everybody contributes to the common goal. And we're finding that a lot of these workers that want to go into the workplace specifically look at SMBs for that specific reason. They're able to scale across an organization, take their skills today, and be able to do things that maybe they would not be able to do in a larger organization. Most importantly, they want to work with founders. They want to work with leaders, and they want the barriers broken down between their level and the highest level in an organization.
Waleed?
That's a valid point. I mean, organizations have rigid hierarchies that SMEs do possess an entirely different culture. And people who have been working in such environments, I would suspect they would have it difficult to incorporate themselves into more of a corporate hierarchy. And again, it depends, again, on what the hierarchy values are and how it promotes these values. I would give you an example from our perspective, Savola. We are a company 45 years old, 16,000 employees around the globe. And we have to find a vision and an identity to kind of unite all of this big structure. And how you do that is creating very strong values and enacting on it. It allows that culture to be embedded all the way down. If you promote inclusivity, if you promote engagement, if you promote trust, all these values, our motto is values built on values. And they have to be really integral. It's not a motto. It is the way you do business. And if you have that done successfully, I think that culture of inclusivity allows maybe some of those people coming from SMEs to thrive. But that is very unique. We would not find this across many organizations.
Well, this was going to be my question, because I know that, oftentimes when you're sitting in boardrooms and you're having board meetings, and sometimes CEOs love to say things like, we have a very entrepreneurial culture. And then you look at the structure of the organization and it's everything but, because it's got about 20 layers, and they never see, the people who are sort of at the very bottom rungs of this ladder. What is it that organizations need to do, or how can they begin thinking differently when it comes to realizing that culture of access to the top and ease of movement between the different layers?
Well, first of all, it needs to be done. And I think within an organization, whether you are a government organization or a large corporation, you can have an SME within your own company. And you need to be able to create that within your company with the ability to be able to leverage what we're learning with the SMEs to be able to do that within your company. So I think you need to flatten organizations in many times, but you also need to have the feedback go up to the top, and it has to be listened to, because employees today in the SME market want to know that their voice is being heard. And that gives them power, and it also provides them the innovation that they need to be able to drive things. And from looking at organizations that do embrace that, you're finding that they are more, they have ability to adapt more regularly.
When you say flatten, and even though I think there's an in-principle agreement, when it comes to materially doing that, it can be quite a different conversation, right? Because you're talking about rejigging organizational processes, you're talking about management structures, you're talking about people who for the past decade have been working on getting to the next level, and then suddenly the next level disappears. So there are sort of some underlying issues that exist. So Waleed, if we try then to realize what Virginia is suggesting, where do you think we would have to start in that process?
I think you really need to have a very strong HR in any organization, particularly large organizations, to make sure that the voices are reflected all the way through. So this is something integral in larger organizations. But this is just a structural point. But when you talk about really having the employees, you can break the buckets in organizations, and it depends really in which bucket you are in the organizations. If you have from large operational units, for instance, and that's how big banks and big organizations are broken into smaller units, and accessibility to the hierarchy of that unit is maintained. Maybe not all the way to the top formally, but however, there are channels through HR and management that you have to foster that culture of basically your voice being heard. It's really crucial.
There are clearly, as we're speaking, many advantages that are emerging, and I think many people can even assume what some of those advantages are. One thing that I do wonder, however, is how can SMEs better take advantage of their intrinsic advantages? In other words, there are some issues and ways of doing business that are really beneficial to SMEs, but because they are so small, they don't necessarily have the time to strategize about how do we make sure that we're taking advantage of our structure as an SME, because they're busy doing business, they're busy working, they're busy getting the work done. How do we help them in making that happen? Because then you get the transfer to the bigger organizations and the support coming down to SMEs.
I think we need to do a better job in the media of highlighting some of the successes that SMEs have. And also we need to highlight some of the people that are change agents. And I think we do a good job, like for example, in this conference today, we're all struggling with how does AI help, and what are the skill sets, and how do we get people back to work? We need to focus on SMEs. We need to take the learnings the successes that we're seeing today and transfer that across all organizations. Again, government and business.
Waleed, what do you think?
It's an ecosystem, I agree. It's an ecosystem. Both large corporates, SMEs, and government have to really work together to ensure that the proper methods and the proper structures are in place across the board. Large corporates cannot thrive without a healthy SMEs. They are the ones that generate employment across the economy, although their contribution to GDP is not that significant at this stage, but the employment size is quite large. So large corporates with small SMEs, with the intervention of the government in terms of funding, will allow SMEs to have maybe some luxury of financial support or training or et cetera, to allow them to adopt and start to think about relevant things for them to grow. And
because one of the big hindrances within an SME environment is career advancement, right? Because they are so flat. For many people, yes, you're exposed to many aspects of business, but you never get to be more than the job that you do. Whereas with a traditional corporate structure, you can work your way up the ladder, eventually, hopefully, to the C-suites, if that's your ambition. How do we then make sure that SMEs are better thinking about supporting career ambition? Waleed, if I could ask Waleed to come back on that, and then you, Virginia.
I think they should tap into some government support in terms of training and development if they don't have the time and they don't have the magnitude, because they are very busy working, doing things. I think they have to make the time and the effort for that training to take place, and that could come with government support. And Saudi Arabia is a perfect example of that. Through HRDF, there's ample training that is taking place tailored to the SMEs to support them on that front.
Virginia?
Well, I think that you're going to find in the SME market, one thing that attracts workers to SMEs is a purpose-driven. And a lot of times it's not going up the career ladder. It's sharing the purpose with the innovator. It's sharing the purpose with the creator. It's being able to be part of the organization, to grasp what's going on. And in some cases, it's not career-driven. Especially if you take a look at the surveys that I've seen most recently, purposeful work, good work, is definitely more important to workers in the new organization, in the new world of AI, than you have versus career development or career growth.
And increasingly so. I think when you listen to young people in particular, purpose-driven organizations are definitely what they are keen to engage in. So if we are then looking at trying to find solutions to this middle ground, because there's a lot of lip service that can be paid to how corporates are allegedly agile. We know that they tend not to be. But there are advantages and disadvantages to both. So here's an exercise that I'd like to do with both of you. And don't worry, it's not scary. It's not hazardous to your health. If we are going to leave this room, you both kind of occupy different ends of the spectrum, or two sides of the coin. So if we are going to leave, I would like you to identify two things each that when you leave here can be implemented in organizations, big corporate spaces that you think can be implemented in bigger corporates, and perhaps two things that SMEs can do so that we can bridge the gap between the SMEs and the corporations without the one swallowing the other. And we don't need to talk about who's going to swallow whom. We already know who's going to swallow whom. So can you work with me on that?
Sure.
All right, Waleed, I'm going to throw you in the deep end. You're going to go first.
Okay. No, I think regular interactions is one thing that you have to make sure that it is part of the mandate of all senior managers to have that. What we call is, we have like town halls, etc., but that's not enough. You need to make sure that you are very close all the way down. So I think institutionalizing a method or an approach that hierarchy of the company should engage across the board with everyone. That is really essential.
That's one thing. The second thing?
Second thing is to be receptive to open criticisms freely and address them adequately, and not really have blocks. You have to really be very receptive to ensure that all the voices are heard.
Okay, I like that. And Virginia?
I think with the SME, what you need to do is you need to put a little bit more structure into many of these organizations, because I think that will help them grow faster and to be more productive, number one. Number two is, I think that you also need to take a look at the SMEs today are going to be the unicorns of tomorrow. So how do you grow? And what is the growth path? And sometimes the founders or the leaders aren't the one to see that vision because they're doing day-to-day work. So I also think you need visionaries within these businesses to take it to the next level.
Okay, so if I were to say that in order for SMEs to be front runners for good work, we need corporates to make sure that leadership at the top is closer to the ground and that they're more receptive to criticism that they would receive. And on the flip side of that, we need to make sure that SMEs have a little bit more structure, so it's not kind of woolly and nilly-nilly, and that there perhaps is more specific focus on how people can grow within those small SMEs. So if we do all four of those things, hopefully we can say yes to the question, SMEs front runners of good work. Do you agree?
I agree.
Do you agree? Are they in the room?
I think they agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
to both
Thank
of you,
you.
Virginia and Waleed, thank you very
Pleasure.
much
Thank
for
you very
joining
much.
us. Much appreciated. Please show them your appreciation. Thank you. Fana, can I ask you to go that way?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Waleed. Thank you.